Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Kathy Vete, 140 Charlotte Place, right across the street. I have a procedural comment. I've been to some of these meetings before, and they're actually a disgrace. You guys should know Robert's rules, parliamentary procedure. One person speaks at one time. And if someone is speaking up here, you don't shout them down. You don't shout each other down. You do realize that when more than one person is speaking, you can't hear anybody. So a little bit of self-control and wait until there's a pause and then reply and get up to your microphone so we can hear you. And I would like to suggest that when the public is speaking, perhaps a 5 or 10 minute limit on their time.
Karen Geiger, 270 Alfred Street. We have two decisions. They were negative for the community. That's a kind way of describing them. And we're going to appeal. All good. Or good that we're appealing, because the alternative to appealing is to have our community overpopulated and to have our infrastructure severely taxed. Nevertheless, I've sat here and listened today to so much misinformation, so much, that it's almost incomprehensible to me that I have read all the court documents, attended more sessions of court than virtually anybody in this room, save the attorneys. And somehow, what was communicated in that courtroom and what is communicated in the opinions of the court is not what's being told to the public. And that is a shame. And I think that the Democrats and the Republicans bear the burden of this, because none of you are correcting with facts. Number one fact, very simple little fact. December 10th, 2018 was the day in which the mayor's 57 unit plan was submitted to the court. That plan was submitted in response to an October court order, which was extended on, the original date was December 7th, and it was moved to the 10th. That plan was submitted and filed and was on e-courts in the month of December. In January, the new council, the Democratic majority, took place. They were asked to vote on a document that had already been publicly submitted by the planning board, by the borough, to the court in response to the court's order for a fair share housing plan. They had no choice but to support that plan publicly, because it was the plan that had been submitted by the borough as its plan for the community. And they did that. And yes, I questioned that plan, and I questioned the experts at the January meeting, and I asked why there was no affordable housing, why there was no affordable housing being put on the Normandy property. And much to my surprise, as I read through the judge's decision, guess what she picked up on too? Constantly. It's not about the MOU. It's not any individual action by this borough that got us where we are. It's the compilation of multiple issues which made this judge believe that this borough was not going to do what the courts, what the Supreme Court requires of every municipality. Now, when you look at her decision, it's very simple. She says that the 77-unit plan, that plan that was submitted in December, before MOU discussions took place, before anything took place, before the community was even aware there was a plan, even though the plan said the community was aware of it. That plan she found to be constitutionally non-compliant. And it's because of the boroughs submitting a constitutionally non-compliant plan that she ruled the way she did, more than any other factor. She says in her opinion that the borough knew in October of 2018 that our number was going to be 584. Not 77, not 146, but 584. That was our obligation. No matter how silly it seems to a resident in a small community such as ours, a community of 1,900 homes, that we should have an affordable housing obligation of 584 makes no sense in this world to anyone in our community. But that's the number we had. And what did this council do? They buried their heads in the sand and came up with a plan for 77 units. Way off the mark. Way off the mark. There wasn't a prayer that she was going to approve it, that the courts were going to approve it. And she addressed this in her opinion. She said that when you settle, you go under one set of rules. Masters, planners, you have a different set of rules when you work out a settlement negotiation, and the court holds a fairness hearing, and perhaps we approve that because the rules are different. But when you come to this court because you've refused to settle, you have to deal with the law in effect. And the law is very telling and very clear and has been affirmed 5 times by the Supreme Court of the state of New Jersey. And as much as it pains me as a resident to see what we're faced with, because I think it will destroy our community, certainly the community that I moved in over 40 years ago, because we can't handle it. We brought this upon ourselves, and we should have settled. I've told this to the Democrats. And I've told it to anybody, because what we're faced with now, we're not going to win. Even if there is no way that Normandy, which has a property which the courts have ruled is available, ready, has a builder who's ready to build, meets all the criteria for getting the first units of affordable housing into this community, is ever going to say no to such a builder. That's why builders' remedy lawsuits were created by the courts specifically to allow for that when a community is constitutionally non-compliant, which is what she termed our 77-unit plan to be. And she enumerated, she went on for a page on all the reasons, therefore. And if you look at other legal decisions, such as Judge Jacobson, who came up with the methodology that was adopted by this court, and which was not contested by anyone, that methodology came up with the 584 number, and it has to do with employment. It's not just land. So the formula works against us because of the type of community we are. It has nothing to do with the racial mix of our community or the ethnicity of our community. We're not being penalized because we're Englewood Cliffs on the Hill. We're being penalized because we haven't built a single unit of affordable housing. We didn't build it in 1997, Mr. Farrow, and you were part of the council when no one on the council wanted to go against the Prentice Hall property and turn it over to affordable housing. It was the same situation that we're facing now with Normandy, no different, and the court recognized it. I'm not saying I would have made a different decision than you sitting there at the time. It was a logical decision in our community at the time, but it's no different from what we have now, except now the courts are against us. We're in court. We're not just before COA. It's very sad. The court said, she pointed out everything. She got it. She said, the court has considered the realities of the situation in the borough of Englewood Cliffs. The uncontroverted reality is a community becoming more exclusive. It has failed to build a single unit of affordable housing, and by rejecting 800 Sylvan, the borough has signaled its intent to continue its exclusionary practices. And she goes on. She talks about a lowballed number of 77 and what a game it is to play that with the court. She caught you at your game, and she called you out for it. And am I happy about it as a resident? Absolutely not. Do I think there's anything that we can do other than appeal? Probably not. But the reality is we're going to have residential housing at 800 Sylvan, and nothing is going to stop that.
And what we'll do is they'll call her out. She can't be constitutionally compliant with a number that the judge never gave us.
She gave you the number,
She gave us the
584.
number. No, that's not the
584.
argument. Yes.
That's the number she gave you. This
I
morning.
approve. I know it.
Good evening. Russell Perino, 220 Fairview Avenue. I'll be short. I humbly disagree with the representation made by the last speaker. If you read the decisions by the court, many things were brought to our attention as residents, as council people, as planning board members. And one thing that's stuck in my mind, and I made a note, and it's the borough acted in bad faith, quote. And what I interpret that to mean is, starting with January, when the new administration came into control, and going through June into July, the judge was led to believe that this case was settling, and she put the trial off again and again and again with that expectation. And when that flip happened, and the resolution was adopted by this council that no, we're not settling, we're going to litigate, that is specifically what she was talking about when she said the borough has acted in bad faith. One can seize on the terms constitutionally non-compliant as the issue and the reason. Bunk. Not true. Okay? What happened was, or what would have happened, let's go back again, and I've said this before in public meetings, if we had continued with our 77-unit plan into court, she probably would have found that it was inadequate, right? Not a surprise. We were told by the professionals, I'm sure you've all heard this on the council, that the borough would have the right to cure any shortfall. So whether the unit, what she decided was 77 or 150, we should have had that right to cure. We lost that right when our immunity was pulled in August. No one talked about that tonight. It's like a deep, dark secret. Our immunity was pulled specifically because the judge feels she was played with. She was strung along for 6 or 7 months, given that impression, and then because of public opinion, the Democratic Council people caved and finally said, okay, now we're not going to settle anymore. You can't do that. That's the fatal mistake. The gentleman talked about strikes 1, 2, and 3. That was strikes 1 and 2 right there. Otherwise, we should have and would have had a right to cure our shortfall. And we could be talking about, or we would have been talking about in February, okay, can we meet 100, 125, 150? So that, to say that the issue here was that we were constitutionally non-compliant with our 77-unit plan, and that's why we're here, not true. One can cherry pick what they want out of these decisions. And I know, because I've followed this, and I've been involved since June of 2017 with this property, Normandy we're talking about, 800 Sylvan Avenue. And I have no bias against the developer. I never did. I think I've tried to caution everything I've ever said. I have no bias against the applicant, that applicant or any other. When we sit on the planning board, we decide based upon the facts that we see. And I defend the board. We're still hearing comments from council people saying it's the planning board's fault. Give me a break. That ship sailed a long time ago. There's enough evidence out there suggesting clearly there's an intent by Normandy to potentially do their affordable housing project. So we'll leave it at that. One thing that I noticed, I was out in the first session of the Builder's Remedy litigation last month. And Mr. Marinello, I'm sorry, it wasn't Mr. Marinello, it was Mr. Wunsch, appeared before the judge saying, Judge, I was dismissed by the borough, but you haven't officially sanctioned it yet. There needs to be a motion to do so. Just a question, has that ever happened now, or is Mr. Wunsch still acting on some level as the special attorney for the affordable housing, from the judge's perspective?
As far as I know, he's still, from the judge's perspective, still on the matter.
Is there, and again, I have nothing against Mr. Wunsch, but I saw him sitting at the trial. I'm sure he's billing the borough for it.
Nobody's asked it
Well, the council took a vote to remove him from the affordable housing litigation. You're the borough attorney.
to. That's not my job.
That's not your job.
Can there be a motion maybe just to get this done? It's silly that we're still talking about it.
Just to be completely honest with you.
Ridiculous, because he knows he was removed and terminated, and so he's just billing everyone.
I was embarrassed for him, quite frankly, sitting there. I mean, it's inappropriate that he was terminated, but in the judge's eyes, he hasn't been.
A billable opportunity,
Is it-
in fact, he added no value other than hurting the borough.
Should there be a motion, basically, to actually finish
I completely
this?
disagree with that, and to be honest with you, it's an embarrassment that we would try to remove Mr. Wunsch in the middle of the trial.
There was a council vote.
It doesn't make a difference.
It does, we run the town, not you.
Well, Judge Farrington is running it right now, Mr. Mayor.
No, she doesn't decide who our lawyers are.
She just is running it for you.
She doesn't decide who our lawyers are.
She just did decide.
So, if I may, moving forward,
I don't even understand. It
to try
doesn't
to-
make any sense. It's not Pagoda either. It's not Pagoda.
It's your responsibility.
It's not my responsibility to remove him.
as
It's
I,
your responsibility not to show up.
Well, that might be true, but that's not
This is exactly what the problem is. They all think they're in charge. He thinks he's in charge.
I don't think I'm in
Why should he be
charge.
moving forward, if I may, the idea is to have something positive to say, and if everyone tried to do that, I think it would be helpful. Although I've been obstructed from participating in any affordable housing conversations of substance since January 7th of 2018, I'm left with speaking here as a member of the public. What I think much of the issue is, from the judge's perspective, and I agree with Ms. Geiger, we are seen as an exclusionary community, and that should have stopped a long time ago. It should have stopped during 2018, and it sure should be stopping now. So although I understand one cannot start construction on the Hudson Terrace project because you don't know what the size of that is right now, there's other properties in the municipality that were looked at back in 2018 that could accommodate, even if it's a small number of units, to show the court system and the world, quite frankly, that we mean to not be an exclusionary community, because we're shuffling papers, there's conversations, there's talk, there's plans. None of it has resulted in even a unit. So I really think, and if someone had asked me this question and invited me back in 2018, I would have said the same thing. Hey, while you're working on whether it's settling or not settling, create some units, whether it's 5, 10, 15, something, so that we don't have the reputation of being exclusionary. I mean, it's crazy. There's things that could be done, I feel, tomorrow, right? And again, I don't know what's happened since then. I know what we looked at. There were options there to do something small. You know our number's going to be big. All you're going to do is offset the number we have to create anyway. So why not get the ball rolling, get to work on actually creating some affordable units on a different parcel besides Hudson Terrace. I know you can't just jump into that and build 77 or 100, 150. I get that. But look at some of the other pieces that the professionals have looked at already. If they haven't shared it with you yet, please ask them to do so. And work on creating a fact, basically a fact, so that the appellate division will see that we're not an exclusionary community. I think that's a really important step to take. It's only going to help. It can't hurt. We know we have to supply and create units anyway. Whether 800 Sylvan gets the build or doesn't get the build, doesn't matter. We're still going to have to build X number of units for the borough. So why are we just sitting back and just spending money and litigating? Spend a little bit of money, get a plan for X number of units on a piece of property the borough already owns, and get the process started. Something constructive, something concrete, not just words, not just lawyers, not just lawsuits. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Perino, thank you for chairing the planning board. Anybody else? Yes.
Lynn Norton, 9 Willow Drive. I have to say, this is the first time I've ever heard volunteerism being considered a negative thing. I don't know, in my family, we're always brought up to give back to our town, whether it's the fire department, which my kids were on, the ambulance corps, which I was on, the school board, whatever. You gave back to your community. So I kind of question somebody saying that this is a bad thing. But getting back to the plans, we're talking about the 77 units at Borough Hall. 77 units at Borough Hall. The original plan, as we sat with the planners, this was going to be a $20 to $30 million project for the borough. We were going to have to bond that and pay off that bond because we were going to have to move the police department and we were going to have to move the community center. Yeah, that was the plan. So I don't know if the 77 units have changed. And of course, there was some deed restriction brought up, which probably wouldn't allow us to do this anyway, which wasn't discussed about the 77 units. So it seems to me that the 77 units was not going to be advantageous to the community because we were going to have to bear the brunt of it. If Normandy built, it would become a rateable and we would get the taxes back on it. That would mean money in our pocket. It will mean more units, yes. But as far as the original discussion of those 400 units, it probably would have been better for us than carrying the burden of $20 to $30 million. I don't know if anyone can tell us what our existing outstanding debt is, but I would say that would probably double it or come pretty close to it. So I think that that was a consideration that also hasn't been brought up. I thank Mrs. Geiger for giving us the facts on the case because that's very helpful because I know I certainly haven't sat and gone through all of these decisions. I do think we have to, have a concern in going forward, and it doesn't help when there's misinformation being spread. So we would appreciate it if we had the facts, not the feelings. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Make a motion to close.
Thank you, everyone. Motion to close. Councilman, I'll make a motion. Versus seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
No opposed? Thank you. Let's just continue with our, attendance and work here.
Mr. Mayor, can I make a motion?
Yeah.
I would like to make a motion to whatever it takes to remove Wunsch. I mean, it was already done, but it looks like there is an issue receiving the judge to receive something.
I was hoping your motion would be to terminate Serenian, Wunsch, Chowder, and Carabella, but it's up to you.
Why don't you write it down?
Motion?
I'll say it.
So you didn't read his mind.
Which motion did you say?
Well, apparently, it's
I don't know what it is.
Well,
we had a motion back in January to remove Wunsch, right? We had a motion, and it was voted on, he was removed, and for whatever reason, it might be political, it might be incompetence, he's still appearing in court. This used to be pretty simple, even for you.
It's actually, there's a court order for him to stay in the
There's not a
case.
court order.
No.
There is.
The judge
No.
doesn't pay for the lawyer.
The
There's
judge
two
did
other
in this
attorneys.
case.
There's two
They-
other
they-
attorneys. Well, that's another ground for appeal, then, but
Well, then maybe you'll make it
it's
an appeal.
completely ridiculous that he even shows up. because
The
he-
judge is waiting for paperwork from the borough, from the council, to let her know that we voted
Yeah.
to remove him.
No, it was very well explained to her that he had been voted to be removed by the
Is this
council.
trial not over?
Well, here's the thing, folks. We had two
But I-
lawyers
but-
before the trial, before our lunch. He considered himself because he was their blocker for me getting information. They terminated him and he's still showing up.
But there is a motion, there-
Second, set a roll.
Now that matters.
May I ask a point of order? Or voting? We already voted, this council voted that. What if they vote not to remove it? What happens? People now for that. I'm just saying.
Well, he's already,
Well, that's why I'm bringing it up.
look,
I don't know how.
You're
I
the
don't even
counsel.
understand the whole
and you're the
process.
attorney, for whatever reason, it's just one more obstacle in good government.
Maybe make that a record. Ramon, maybe you want to rescind your motion and maybe just look into how you I don't know. I'm
Well,
not an
he's
attorney.
our attorney.
We could table it.
I've never been asked to remove a lawyer in the middle of a trial. Well, then what are you removing him from?
For billing you further, because quite frankly, you have to bill.
Listen, there's a motion, let's see whether the motion bears out. I don't get the vote.
Well,
that he was removed
You asked me
already.
a question.
Well, the judge told you to file a.
The judge didn't tell me to do anything. The judge told me to do anything,
Well, why don't you do this? Why don't you call out one to show up?
because that's not how it works.
Mayor, can we have Councilman repeat the motion, please?
I
Not
think
really
he already
It's-
has. He's just saying procedurally, he wants to.
We already voted to remove him, but for some reason the judge is allowing him to stay because she is waiting from the council.
No,
Yes.
because,
She
No,
is
that's
waiting
not
from the
correct.
council, yes.
no, the
Yes.
trial didn't end, so therefore she says he cannot be removed without proper motion.
Well, that's what I'm doing right now.
That's different from.
Well, let's have, has Normandy opposed Al Bunch being removed? Get back there.
I gotta ask, I don't know.
No one asked you yet?
I gotta ask. I think.
I know you guys are the ones who told him that I shouldn't be
Listen,
inside
you know-
of the meeting.
I don't,
Just remove him, will you? Somebody.
Well, there is a motion.
Yeah.
If I may, I was in the courtroom for this,
Are we really doing this?
You know
Are we
what?
really doing this?
We're in the middle of a vote, and you're gonna let the public speak now?
He was there.
You're not following Robert's rules.
from Mr. Marinello requesting
Right.
that he be dismissed from the case. That's what the judge wanted.
So why don't we just follow the rules? We don't need a motion right now.
I think you need a
You want a motion directing Mr. Marinello?
That's right.
Yes,
File a motion
yes, that's what I want to do.
Remove Al Bunch. Fine, that's the motion.
So that's not what he said, but that's what he said.
Well, but that's what I'm
All right, I'm going to
Yes.
abstain. I don't even
So
understand.
that's the motion you're
what-
making.
Yes.
Have a motion.
I have
to
a motion
direct
to the,
Marinello to have a motion to remove
Yes.
Bunch from the.
Yes, that's-
Are
litigation.
you putting words in his mouth?
no, he's not. That's what,
Okay, take the vote. Take the vote.
Councilman Wu
Let's
second.
take notes for a moment.
Councilperson Sparrow?
yes,
Savari?
Abstain.
O?
Abstain.
Sung?
Yes.
Aversa? Wu?
Yes.